Welcome to the Bourbon and Brands podcast, where we have simple conversations with successful people over a glass of our favorite brown spirit, bourbon. What's been up with you today? What have you been up to?
Today has been a pretty regular day. So got up, my daughter's out of school, so that obviously wrecks any kind of routine that I like to have in the morning. So you just kind of roll with those punches and adjust as you can go. So it was a day of calls, day working with my team, a little bit of group coaching. We do some group coaching for just conversational stuff. And then, cleaned up and came down here to come hang out and drink and have a conversation. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So how old is your daughter? What's her name?
Her name is Alice, and she is 10 years old.
10. Okay. So
yeah.
I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old daughter.
Okay.
About to be 14. So it's scary business in my house. You got like teens going on, and on top of that, teen girls. Which
I can't look at that yet.
Just take it slow and enjoy it while she's not thinking about boys and phones and devices and all that stuff. Because man, it gets here quick, and it's like no turning back, man.
It's so interesting because I wanna empower her to like go be herself and everything else like this. But like, there's these moments to where like, I just keep expecting her to like fall into some of the same stuff that I did as a kid. Like I'm waiting for her to come in and like something very similar to the Ninja Turtles. Right. And so when she comes in and she's like Minecraft and I'm following this YouTuber, I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't going to be a thing. And then it really is a thing, then is it too much of a thing? And you kind of have to go in there and kind of figure it out. It is so unique, you know?
Yeah. And, one of the things that I found interesting in your story and what you've been up to is that you seem to have fallen in love with the sales game, which is kind of what you're known for, right? Is this sales guru. You've got the coaching that you do. You've got the website, adaptedgrowth.com, and then obviously the new book, and everything's centered around the sales process. And so that seemed to have started pretty young in your life. So when did you first kind of realize that, hey, sales and talking with people and kind of that convincing element, I'm good at that, I've got that. Where did you learn that? Man,
it's such a unique kind of path. The jump specifically into sales was around the idea that I didn't really want to wait tables anymore, right? Like I didn't want to have to go to work at night. I was working downtown Fort Worth, and I would be walking in on like a Friday night, right, to go make my money, right? That's where you make your money as a server. I was working at Rezu's, and you're walking in past like, all the great spots, right? And they're booming and everyone's having a great time, and I'm going to work. Yeah. And like, there's got to be a better way, right? Okay, so what could there be? Yeah. And kind of fell into a sales role with T-Mobile, right? And was selling cell phones. Yeah. And someone left, and so a sales role actually opened, and so I hopped in there, and it was just go get it, go sell everything, always ask. And it was very much that, like, always did that for a while, decided I didn't want to do that, moved around, did some other things. I played poker for a little while during that whole exchange, whole big journey around that. And then decided I didn't want to play poker anymore. I didn't want to deal with the emotional swings of it, because while I was winning, I wasn't like crushing, and maybe this isn't what I want to do forever. So come home, I'm going to go get back into sales. I go get back into sales roles, and then go through quite the journey, right? Sales is easy to move around in when you're successful, right? So you give someone a great experience, you get poached, right? So sold someone an iPhone at AT&T. They liked me for banking. They moved me over to banking. I get poached to another bank. And then all of a sudden, I don't really want to be a banker. I don't really want to do financial advising, because there's an undercurrent to that I didn't really gel with. Yeah. And a guy from my Kung Fu school that I was training at and coaching at was like, hey, I got a spot, and it's going to be rough, but I think you might be great at it. And it was medical device sales. And so, man, talk about the ultimate humbling experience, right? Going from a situation to where there's people at the door, right? Like, it's just like try to maximize the opportunity. So you have to go find an opportunity and then maximize it. And it was rough. It was the hardest transition I've ever gone through my entire life. And at this time, there's another friend of mine at the same Kung Fu school, and he's like, you should come meet my coach. And I'm like, I don't need a coach. In an environment where I'm coaching him because my Kung Fu coach had coached me. Like, the absurdity is very high in this situation. And so finally I swallowed my pride. I went and met a coach, had a fantastic experience. I worked with him for the next 8 years and went on to go start a business with that partner. And it was just about, I want to learn this. Like, there's so much more to this than I had ever thought there was.
Yeah.
Like, don't show me knowledge and like hide it away from me. I can't stand it. Like even today with my team, like someone was like, hey, we'll talk about this later. No, I need a little context right now, because you don't want me to like just kind of like spool. Like, settle me. What are we talking about tomorrow? And then I can go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so this idea that sales and conversations was fundamentally different than anything I had ever seen before, right? That Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, always be on, always be closing and stuff was very much that banker, financial advisor. Even it was even in the retail sales with like T-Mobile, AT&T. And so we move over into small business and it's like, no, you got to disqualify. You need to like not work with everybody. And it's like, what? You know, so like kind of this weird middle ground of like qualifying and stuff. And then I start to learn about the marketing side of things, of put down the ego completely. There shouldn't be any ego, because these steps are going to happen naturally and it's going to be okay. And sample size matters, and like meaningful friction is important to the process.
Yeah. And so what, one thing that you said there that really caught my attention is the whole coaching thing. And I think that is missing so much in so many businesses today. And they find themselves like almost feeling alone. And it is because they are alone at the helm, and they don't have anybody that they can really go and seek advice from and really get an accountability source, and someone that can, you know, not only pour information into them, but help guard them from poor decisions and from mistakes that person has made in the past. And so, you know, what was it about? What was that light bulb moment for you in knowing that, hey, to be successful in really any business venture, you need a coach? Man, I didn't realize this for a long time, but like I've always been in somewhat of a coached environment, right? I have a speech impediment. I've had it ever since I was a kid. I have a stutter. And from kindergarten all the way up until 8th grade, I was in speech therapy, right? So once a week I was just going and meeting with a speech therapist that the school provided. And man, it was not cool to be the guy who had to go to speech therapy because of the stutter. It was absolutely brutal. And everybody was just slow down. Yeah. John, slow down. This is happening because you're talking too fast. If you would just slow down. And the whole time I'm telling my family I want to be a stand-up comedian, and they're like, maybe not, and all of this stuff. And so this just goes on. I've been hypnotized for it, all these things. And then finally in 8th grade, a new teacher came to the school, and she was fresh out of school, and she had brand new knowledge. Like, and it wasn't just like slow down and think before you speak. It was do this thing, and then the rest will happen, right? A little bit of technique creates this thing. And I was obsessed with this idea, and that's what actually got me past stuttering. Really? Most people have no idea that I have a stutter. So the fact that I have a podcast, I'm a salesperson, I coach, I deliver all this stuff is absurd to people, because when I was a kid, one of my clearest memories is talking to my mom and her being like, come on, spit it out, because it was the 80s and you didn't know you didn't do that kind of thing. So to be here is a pretty big deal. So I got coached there. I was in high school band, right? So you have coaches there, and they're constantly do it again. You know, could you do it a little bit better? Could you hit that note a little bit cleaner? Okay, great. And you start to fall in love with like the refinement of it. Yeah. And then after that, I kind of had this kind of weird point in college to where like I was just like a college kid. I didn't really have anything. And then I joined the Army, which was the polar opposite of that, right? You know, you get coached, excuse me, to the gills and then some. Yeah. And so then I came home from there, and that's when I found Kung Fu, like, and really fell in love with Kung Fu, which is very much a coached environment. Yeah. And when I was playing poker full time, I had a coach there. So like I've always kind of had this person who really, it's about like kind of calling you on your stuff, because, you know, you can talk yourself into anything. You have this great book here, Influence. It's one of my favorite books. I talk about it all the time because like once you start to look at those kinds of things, the things that are being used and the things you use inadvertently to get the things you want, you start to look at all this stuff a little bit differently. Yeah. And
it starts with really kind of just being okay with that. Like, this is all going on all the time, and you're using it without even realizing it.
Absolutely.
And then like marketer, there's that saying that everything is great until marketers get a hold of it, which is, everybody overcompensates once they learn that there's like a volume component, and then you have to kind of dial it back, and where are you okay with it? And that's where all the subjectivity is. Some people love the volume game, some people want the quality game, and everything is just a conversation within those two realms.
Yeah. And that's really cool, because I come from a very coached background as an athlete. I grew up playing sports and played up through college, and your coach was a huge part of your development and
Absolutely.
Your success. Like, you owed a lot of your success to your coach. And it's just amazing how you see just a switch from that in the business world of where, CEOs and even young entrepreneurs starting up companies. I would say the number one thing that you need to find is somebody who you can rely on as a mentor or a coach.
Absolutely.
Who's been there, done that. And there's no coach that I had other than Little League and T-ball and stuff, or somebody's dad, but when you get up into high school and college sports, that coach has been a ball player or been in that sport for their whole life too. And they understand it. They've been there. They've had broken arms and legs, and they've had ups and downs, and they've been cut from teams and all. So they have something that you need, and that's experience. And so there's no better place that is necessary than in the business world if you want to be successful. And so I love hearing that from you as a key component to being successful in sales, but in anything in life, is to find somebody who's willing to invest in you and pour their information and knowledge into you from their experience. So one question I had in thinking about this today is, and I had this weird moment yesterday driving. Okay. And I'm just going to tell you the crazy things I think about when I'm driving, because I drive a lot.
Man, so I love this.
I'm driving. Okay. And I have this random thought, and it totally freaked me out. So I don't know if you're like this, but anytime I get in the truck to go somewhere, first thing I do is I put it up on Google Maps, right? Or Waze or whatever app you're using. Even if it's places I kind of know how to get there anyways, I still just put the map up so that way I don't have to think about where I'm going. Right. So I just drive. And so I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking about how often in my life I just put the destination in and I just drive, and I don't think about where Google tells me to go. It just says turn left here, turn right here, take this road. And I don't even think, is this right? I just do it.
You just do it.
And so I was thinking about like the power of Google in itself and the algorithms and the things that they have influence over our lives. And what if Google could tell you to go certain ways based on advertisers who want you to drive past their business? And so I had this like mind-blowing moment where I'm sitting here, I'm like, what if, because you drive past billboards.
Yeah.
You drive past restaurants, you drive past stores, you drive past all these things. And as you're driving, you're peeking around and you're looking, and they trigger thoughts in your head. And you're like, man, I have been wanting Whataburger recently or whatever. And so what if Whataburger paid Google to say, hey, this guy needs to go here. So anytime anyone needs to go from A to B, let's have them go past us, and we'll pay you for every person that goes past us. Yeah. Now, I don't think that's in that degree a thing yet. I could totally see it being a thing. But in thinking about all of the forward thinking, and this also came fresh off of a chat I heard between Gary Vee and Zuckerberg about the metaverse thing and that whole deal. So in thinking about the future of kind of the way we will do life, which is it seems like it's trending, whether we like it or not, toward this kind of virtual realm that we will kind of do life and experience relationships in. How do you think that will affect the need for salespeople, for people that physically kind of reach out to others in a relational way in order to build business? Or do you think that will become one day obsolete and everything will just be digital salespeople, like billboards, ads, digital spaces? Have you ever thought about that?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think
it's crazy to think about, right? Because you think about the 50s and 60s and 70s where you had the door-to-door sales guy that was selling you a Hoover vacuum, right? And those guys made a living by being great salespeople. Mm-hmm. And that's what your business is built on, which is amazing, because I think that that's absolutely a gift, first of all. Mm-hmm. But I think some of the techniques can be taught, but I do think it's a gift. But also I think that, that's something I resonate with because I'm a sales guy. I mean, that's how I've done the things I've done in business, is by relationship building and sales. And so when I think about it from my own standpoint, I'm curious to talk to somebody like you who's in that sales realm. Is there a thought that one day sales will be completely different than it is right now, as far as face to face, person to person?
Man, this is a great conversation. I get some flack sometimes from people, right? Because I love marketing. Like I am obsessed with it, right? And like I kind of think of marketing as a tool you can use to get flow in your direction, right? To get people to come in your direction, to generate wonder, whatever these things are. And the way that I think about sales is that salespeople can be the chaos filter, right? Because, the marketing is about that one to many. It's about getting that volume approach and stuff like that. And so when you're letting everybody in, right? If you're opening all the gates, hey guys, come on in here. Your quality is not going to be probably where you want, right? And people talk about like growth phases and then culling phases and growth phases and stuff like that. Like if eventually when you're not oscillating between those two things, it's like, cool. Where's that autopilot? Where are those turns? Where is that Google map of these things? Right. And at that point, it's about like your quality standards, right? Like, online course completion, right, is an absurdly low rate. And the reason why is because they'll just sell it to anybody who wants it, right? Mm-hmm. But the minute the quality becomes a measure or something that's important to you, then you might put a salesperson in there, right? And you might not even call that person a salesperson. You might call them an admissions coach. You're right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And they're doing the same thing that a good salesperson is doing, right? They're qualifying for fit. They're making sure, like discovering expectations, pain points. Is there something really here or not? And when we look at it from that point of view, when a salesperson can be the qualifying force, right? Because like when you're the business owner in a very small organization, you're doing a bad job of multitasking between sales activities, product improvement, marketing stuff. If you're wearing all those hats, it can be terrifying, the concept of giving over this thing to someone else, right? If you're doing a good job at it, right? If you're doing a bad job on it, then everyone's like, oh my God, please come take care of this. I'm not a salesperson. That's what you do. Yeah. But if it's been working, right? You have a thing that works, right? Whether, it's networking or referrals or direct selling or whatever it is, now it's terrifying because you know how hard it is to build it, right? Yeah. And so, not to mention, lots of people mean very, very well, but they act in ways that kind of like don't make sense in this realm. The well-meaning owner who brings on the salesperson, but that owner is still taking all of their networking conversations, all their internal conversations, and then they're mad that they're bringing in more revenue than the salesperson who doesn't have access to these things. Like, there's a very clear reason why that is happening if you can disconnect and look at it, right? Yeah. And it's little stuff like that of what are we working towards, right? Because sales has got this terrible view from the outside of it, of just like, you're never there in the office, so therefore you got to be on the golf course or you got to hammer it. There's just, everybody has a kind of negative opinion about it. Right. So I think that persuasion and influence is always going to be a thing. And when your salespeople are motivated and incentivized and coached and encouraged to make sure, hey, no one crosses this unless they're just like a fantastic fit for the team. Yeah. And I think that you're hitting the nail on the head, is no matter how far we advance technology wise, it's just going to be hard to replace that human in the process of that interaction, to be able to vet leads and to be able to really close deals and that sort of thing. Absolutely. Unless we just as a people group become so
trained in our minds to where we're just aimlessly buying stuff and just here, take it again, which I can see that happening too, which is scary. But let's switch gears for a second.
Sure.
Let's talk whiskey, okay? Because that's why we're here as well. Now, when I reached out to you and we were talking about the show, you mentioned that you're a big Buffalo Trace guy.
Yeah,
that's kind of your go-to,
your
your staple. I don't disagree one bit that would be a staple for anybody for the rest of their life, and that would be a great staple to have. Now, you wanted to try and kind of branch out a little bit and try a couple differences.
Yeah.
Right? You wanted to try two whiskeys bourbons rather, that were kind of different from one another, and really kind of hone in on what those differences are. So I thought, with your last name being Hill, John Hill, it automatically came in my head, like, let's try some Heaven Hill, right?
Okay.
So Heaven Hill is what we've started off with, and I've emptied my glass already, but
yeah, I'm slower than you are. Yeah,
I've been trying not to talk, so I've been drinking a lot over here. So, but yeah, the Heaven Hill here, bottled in bond, which is kind of not just a staple for me, but really a staple in the U.S. This stuff has been around since the early 1900s. 1935 is when they started distilling this stuff. And then another bottle that's made in the Heaven Hill distillery is the Rittenhouse Rye, both bottled in bond. And so when looking at bottled in bond products, of course, this started in 1897, the Bottled in Bond Act, which was the first real consumer protection type law that the government put out because of all the crazy people who just wanted to capitalize on the whiskey industry and just started making whiskey. And some of it was safe to drink, some of it wasn't, not so safe to drink. So they come out with this Bottled in Bond Act. So when consumers look at this, they see that on the label and they know, like, okay, this is quality. These people had to go through a lot to make this stuff have that on the label. So, some of that is, I don't know what all the bottled and bond requirements are. There's a lot of them, but it has to be distilled by one distiller in one distillery during one distillation season. So that's important. It's got to be distilled to exactly 100 proof. And there's a lot of other regulations and, strict guidelines put by the government to do that. So it's not cheap to do that as a distillery, and it's not easy to do that as a distillery. So there's a ton of respect on the label when you see that. And so it got me thinking, okay, that's the marketing approach of a bourbon brand, of a whiskey brand, right? So that's their marketing approach. That's how they help customers when they're walking and looking on that shelf. Their stuff sticks out because it says that Bottled in Bond, and they feel safe. They feel like this is going to be a safe bet for me.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, they felt really safe about it, of course, because there was a lot less restriction. And today, it's just like there's a lot of options. They may not think about it that way, but it got me thinking about, like, in other businesses, right? Because Bottled in Bond is just really in the liquor industry. But what types of assurances can companies give consumers? And in their marketing, what kind of things can they do to give that same type of assurance? Like, this company is vetted. They are well respected. They've gone through a lot of hoops to get this, to be where they're at, and it kind of got me thinking of, like, is there such a thing as a quote unquote bottled in bond idea or process or, type of mission or passion that a business can adopt and say, hey, we're going to do business this way in order that consumers see that and they feel safe doing business with us. And so I'm curious to see what you kind of think about that, as far as, from your sales standpoint, what are some things that you can do in the sales process in talking with potential clients and customers to help them kind of rest assured in what you're talking about is vetted and is something that's worth trusting?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. In the sales side of things is you have to be seen as a human individual first, right? Yeah. Because if they see you as a salesperson, right? Like, I think I've lied to a salesperson in the past week, right? Like, I'm sure some solar guy has come by and knocked on the door and I've lied to him, but like, And I don't even feel any compunction about it. I mean, I love salespeople. Like, I love it. I love anybody who wants to work on the craft, but anybody who just wants to show up and is just going to talk real fast and like is going to use the like, let's have some awareness about like the situation that you're in, man. Like, I get cold knocked about solar stuff 15 times a week. So
I'm surprised that you don't just bring them in your house and be like, hey man, here's my book. Let me give you a quick little 5-minute webinar right here in person. And let me just teach you a couple things. And then you go to the neighbor and see if it works, type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever thought about that with a salesperson that comes up and you're like, hear their pitch and you're like, man, there's so many things you could tweak on this deal. And do you ever give them some advice on that?
Man, it's so funny.
Amazing.
It's so funny. There's that line that nobody wants free advice, right? If they want advice, they'll ask you for it, right? So I do actually use that as a way to just like shut people down, right? Because now everybody gets DMs as well, right? If you have a business, if you're on these social platforms, if you're putting yourself out there, you're getting pitched all the time, right? So people will send these messages, right? And I coach a lot of online people, right? So I craft DM messages. I help people like stir up this interest so that way the Zoom call is now approachable and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to talk to a salesperson. Never, right?
It's not something we wake up looking forward to.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
So what that means is that when you make a direct ask of like, hey, I think there's room for us to work together. Do you think there's room for us to work together? Would a Zoom call make sense? If they say no, you now know something, right? Because you've crafted a direct ask, right? As opposed to, I would love to get to know you, right? Which kind of means you're kind of murking the water up a little bit. You're kind of clouding it, right? You're kind of hiding your real intention of this thing, right? Yeah. Which, depending upon them and their personality and how they view the situation, they might be like, and they're looking to drop the shoe on you, right? Because they're thinking about, well, you want to get to know me? No, you just want to sell me, because people don't really want to get to know me. But if you're the kind of person who's used to getting to know people, man, that's a great way to enter the conversation. The only thing that has changed is who's receiving that message. Like, what do they see? What do they hear? What do they feel when they see that? Right. So this thing that you're talking about is along those same lines, right? Can you be trusted? Right? Is the intention what you think it is? Yeah. Right. And
like, that's one thing that I've, in my sales experience, and when I've talked with people with Tourmax or with Brandland or whatever company that I've been a part of in the past, in talking with them about how to engage potential clients and customers, I always tell them to approach it as if you are on their team and you're looking out for them. And kind of take this like, hey, we're in this together type mentality. And I think that's what the Bottled and Bond Act was all about, is the company, the distiller, saying, we want you to feel comfortable with this product because we want to feel comfortable with the product that we're drinking too. We relate to you. We are you. And so that's what makes the sales game significant, is when you can kind of cross that border to where, like you said, I'm a sales guy over here and you're a lead, and you just totally do away with those titles and say, you're a person, I'm a person. You're a consumer, I'm a consumer. Here's how I would come on your team, and let's look at this together and see if you actually have a need, because you may not. You may not have a need that I can fix. And so I thought that was kind of interesting when you said that, as like that is the Bottled and Bond Act for any salesperson listening to this. The Bottled and Bond Act for you is to be relatable, to be just another human being, first and foremost, and not be that sales guy that's saying, here's what I've got, do you want it? It's like, what do you need? Do I have it? Because you may not have it.
Absolutely, man. Most salespeople don't warrant the reputation that they are given, right? That you're trying to talk people into stuff, and you're just trying to close people, and all these things, because you get so much rejection as a salesperson, right? If you're doing it well, you're supposed to get a bunch of no's, right? If everybody is saying yes, that's great, but why? You should be slightly concerned. Maybe you should be charging more. Maybe you should be a little tighter with the concerns. Because the thing that I find really interesting is, for like, I love this, like this bottled in bond, but there's a bunch of bottles on the wall here behind you that don't lean into that, right? So what I love is exploring the inverse that is left open by the market that they're shouting about, right? Because great, right? Because then someone comes along and like, man, we don't want to pay for all of this stuff because it's all of these hoops and they're very expensive, and we just like really love our product and we're not going to go do this. So then you have to like lean into like that kind of outlaw branding, right? You know, we're not doing it this way. We got to go do it this way. And like, that's the thing that I'm fascinated about, because, you know, sometimes it's rather intentional, you know, and sometimes you just kind of do your thing, and then it just kind of ends up shaking out by itself, which I think is interesting. And as a brand guy, right, how the concern is always that it's going to be fake, you know, inauthentic, right? How do you get people to like lean into it and approach it? Because like, you have to, you know, if you're running a company, you can't just turn away from it and just like hope for the best and stuff like that, because you know, that's a terrible. And
that's why, you know, you like you love marketing. I love marketing. And that's where the marketing piece comes in, is like, that's the leaning in process, is that's the opportunity that you give consumers a chance to lean in with that advertisement, with that billboard, with that commercial, with that film, whatever it is. That's their opportunity to lean in and say, do I want to be a part of this family or not? You know, because that looks really fun, or that looks really good, or that looks like exactly what I want to be. And so I'm just going to come right out and ask you. Okay. I'm going to cut right to the chase here.
I'm nervous.
Now, take yourself out of the equation. Who is the greatest salesperson that you've ever heard of? Like you're starting a company and you get to go hire one salesperson to head up your sales team. Who's that person going to be? I know you've got to have one. Like, are we talking like fictional character? Are we talking someone live? Are we talking author? Are we talking guru? If it's a fictional character, that would be pretty cool too. But I mean, who do you think really encapsulates your style? Like, who you think is super effective in the sales game, and why? What is it about them that really, you know, says that, you know, to you, like, that guy's getting it right, or that lady's getting it right? You know, wow, that's a really great question. I've never been asked that before. You've never been asked that as the sales guru of the world? I mean, of course it would be you. Sales guru of the world. I mean, hardly. Wow, man, that's such a great question. I mean, you've read books by sales guys. Oh, tons of books. Probably done some courses. Yeah, man, all of that stuff. So there's a guy, this is going to sound a little bit weird. There's a guy named Patrick Lencioni who's written a bunch of just like kind of general books about business and leadership and stuff like that. He has a book, and I'm probably going to get this wrong. It's called Getting Naked, right? And it's really about. I think I've seen that book. Yeah, I've seen that title somewhere. It's told as a narrative, which is common for his books, right? It makes them very easy to kind of read, because some of these books, man, are like dense, like influence. Right. Man, you gotta want it, you know, like he didn't write that thing of like, let's make this approachable, you know, like it's a slog, and the nuggets are well earned in that thing. So, but in this book, the story is about a consultant who makes a transition, and he uncovers the culture of this company as the salesperson and as the consultant. And then great story. But one of the things that he talks about is like, I forget exactly the label of it, but my friend Dan calls it leading with conflict in our coaching, because when it's meaningful to you, it should be meaningful to the conversation, right? If you know that you can only help a super small percentage of the population, like, let's be super aware of that, right? Yeah. And it's so funny because entrepreneurs do know that. Like, they're very concerned about like, hey, let's qualify for fit. Let's make sure this is a really great fit, especially like in marketing agencies, right? Because you're selling, you know, ads, you're selling phone calls, appointments, right? And you have a method of the madness, right? That's what they have to buy into, because most people have had a bad experience with a marketer who has their metrics that don't really lead to anything that is impactful to the business, you know? And so what are you mostly concerned about is really the thing that's super important to remember. And
this is what I fight with people all the time about, is like a commission only salesperson is not going to be concerned about the long-term fit of the clients that they're trying to close. They're trying to close enough to keep their bills paid, or how to manage their time so that way they can go look for a job that's going to give them a base, right? Because if they're the kind of person who loves that, guess what? They're so entrepreneurial, they're not going to stay with you for very long anyway. Yeah.
So I'm curious, what would your pay structure, or what would it look like? Like if you're going to hire, if you own a business, let's say you own a, I don't know, any kind of, well, let's say you own an electronics store. You sell electronics, and you need to hire some salespeople. How, knowing what you know and the experiences you've had, what kind of structure would you have set up with them in order to give them that buy-in, first of all? Like, hey, I care about the long haul. I care about the culture. I care about the relationship. But also, it's obviously it's got to work for your expenses, right? As a company. So absolutely. What would that look like? Like, have you thought about that? Like, what would that, in your mind, how would that work? What's the best balance there?
You know, for all of our clients, it kind of comes down to what does the business own as far as the process, and what are you expecting the salesperson to own? Right? There's a bunch of people who will start an agency, they'll get some success, and they get super busy, and now it's time to figure out the next step, right? And in most of those situations, the first thing that people do, or one of the things that people most often do, is they're going to go find a VP of sales who already has a network, right? And that person is going to come in, and they're going to be great at getting meetings with their network, right? And then when those meetings run out, they're not necessarily super motivated to go prospect, right? Because they were here to work their network. That's what they're going to do. It just takes more time, boss, and things like that. And a lot can be explained away in the name of, developing a relationship, building value, and things like that. So when you don't do a good job of explaining like why these fits are important, you're going to have to deal with their view of why it's important. And if they can only eat when they're getting paid, like the things that are going to be important are the things that close deals, right? Yeah. So then your brand standards might be just completely out of the window because this person's got to eat, versus, hey, this person sounds like they might be a little wild, a little like not really our fit. I feel like I should disqualify them. Like that's unapproachable if you don't hit goal, if you're going to get coached or fired out or something else like this, So do you build the culture the right way so that way the people want to care, right? How you talk, how you measure indicates the culture you're going to have. So now, one thing I was looking at, and I believe it was on your website, is talking about the process that you kind of developed and you coach through and everything like that. And one thing that we struggle with from a marketing creative agency, right, is that our clients want to see a certain ROI. They want to know that like all your marketing efforts that you're doing, all the dollar spends or the ad spends that you're spending and the retainer fees and all that stuff, like what's it getting me? And of course, most of them say, I want to make X amount of dollars and I want you to prove that you made me X amount of dollars, And that's the hard part because as a marketing agency, I say, my job is to get them to you as a salesperson. Like I'm trying to get you as much warm leads as possible. And then you have to close the deal. Like your website or like the flow or whatever system you have set up that we're driving traffic to, like you've got to do your job too. Absolutely. And so like marketing and sales kind of go hand in hand, and actually the marketing kind of hands off to the sales, at least in my mind. Is that the way you see it as well? I think if God, these are great questions. I feel like most people on the planet would love to be able to market all the way to conversion without having to inject a person who needs time, needs training, needs cost associated with it. I think that most business owners would say that it would be great if they could hit their goals without having to invest a salesperson, right? So if we start from that idea, we would need to really make sure that our process, right, the things, the churns, the thoughts, the friction points are going to come out with people who are going to stay, right? In a marketing agency, it's all about your like monthly recurring revenue, right? And getting into kind of forward thinking of, cool, like we close this client, they're going to be here for 6 months. Okay, that's great. We now have 6 months of buffer, right? And then let's hope they stay longer than that, right? And that happens when the expectations are met, when their day-to-day experience meets up with what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And now when you think of the sales role, okay, and now in my analogy, I'm thinking even like the website is the salesperson.
Agree completely. Yeah.
The customer service person is a salesperson. So like all the process is, they're really mini salespeople all along the way. But when you think of the role of the traditional salesperson, like he or she goes out, gets the client, brings them in, introduces them to their company, and they begin working with one another. What emphasis do you put on a salesperson for follow-up from that, like retaining that relationship? Is their job done at the close of the deal, or is it like, do you ever coach and stress the fact of, hey, it's good to drop by donuts every once in a while. It's good to go by there and just see how things are going, to be a part of the process from there, because the longer that because you were the first port of contact most of the time. Mm-hmm. So the more that you can retain that relationship and FaceTime with them, the better that they feel about the relationship. So is that a part of your process at all?
Man, yeah. We talk a lot about where those handoffs are going to be, right? Because for every person who works back office who hates the salesperson because they brought in a deal who didn't really fit what they thought that it should be, there's a salesperson who's pissed off that the onboarding person didn't reach out and like pick up the conversation, right? The product person didn't reach out and do their kind of follow up and stuff like that. So so everybody's mad at each other, really, is what it kind of boils down to. And honestly, really, really great companies, in my view, spend a lot of time looking at those overlap points, right? Like, call it onboarding, call it setting expectations, whatever it is. Like, most of what I talk about in sales is about setting the appropriate expectation for the conversation. Marketing is the exact same way, right? And you can do so much like with like automation of just setting the appropriate tone and expectation and stuff. So what it comes down to for me is like, should that be the salesperson, right? You've covered what you needed to cover. At what point are you just taking a meeting to have it on the calendar kind of thing, you know, because like sometimes that, especially when you're smaller, if you're an entrepreneur, like you need meetings, you got to get the name out there. You need the reps. You got to share the story enough times. But when the minute you hire a salesperson, everyone is a little bit more objective over like, hey, how are you spending your time? Why'd you take this meeting when you've taken a meeting over here that was like just as absurd, but it was yours and that's okay. And now it's someone else's and it's not,
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I'm probably going to regret saying this, but oh my gosh.
Now I'm excited. Let's dig in.
Man, but there's a few good ones that I've had. Car salesmen. Okay. And I know. Listen, I know.
Oh, okay.
I know. I'm going to regret it. No. But here, listen, hear me out a second. Car salesman. Okay. I have one that sold me a Denali for my wife. 5-6 years ago. Okay. And the dude still sends me Christmas cards. He still calls me every 3 to 6 months and asks me how she, does she need an oil change? Bring it in. I'll give you a certain percentage. He's just like, he's in touch. He's still in touch.
Yeah.
And there's something to that, maybe call me old school, that I like that. Some youngsters probably would find that like just overbearing and like, hey man, leave me alone, obnoxious. But I think that there's an old school value to that. And the fact that he cares, it almost, at least it sounds like he cares about the relationship past the transaction, past the like, hey, I did my job, I made my money. And a lot of salespeople say, great, cool, I'm on to the next one. But he's thinking, can I make more money? Can I add value? Can I be a part of your life? Can I help you buy a car, your kids buy a car, your relatives buy, and there's something to that. And so it kind of, the car salesman's an old school approach, but I'm wondering, in your mind, what old school, traditionally, quote unquote, old school sales tactics are still relevant today?
Oh man.
Because there's gotta be something that we can glean from that era of face-to-face, knocking on the door, taking 100 no's to get that one yes type mentality, and relationship, like true relationship face to face, that is threatened by the culture we live in today where everything's automated. Like, hey, I'll just set like an email thing that'll send them something every, and it's kind of replaced by automation. And to me, while you're still kind of accomplishing the same thing, you're not. It's like that old school mentality, and maybe I'm just old school, but I love that about the old sales process, which is a lot of how I do sales today. Is I want to meet you. I want to be in front of you. I don't even want to Zoom you half the time. And that's what we've had to do the last couple of years, but man, I've hated it. Mm-hmm. I'd rather meet you for some whiskey or coffee or something and really get to know you and what your goal and your visions are, as opposed to just shooting you emails to where there's no face with it. You know what I mean?
Man. Well, this is so fascinating because I have the curse of knowledge here, right? I mean, this is what I do all day. So this is such a great conversation because my view is too informed, right? I know too much about these tools. I know that there's so much gray in this range that you just talked about here, right? And that's just because I live in there all day, every day. It's all that I do. Because the way that I think about sales is there's a thing in online marketing around the idea of your appointment cost, right? Like you got lots of impressions, you got lots of clicks and stuff like this, but you actually got an appointment over here, right? And like that metric.
And it's a real person.
Yeah.
Like you need to realize that this isn't just like another number and another transaction, man. That's a person that really cares about their business.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And when you can start thinking about, let's not waste anybody's time, right? Because time is the non-renewable resource, right?
Yeah.
So when you can associate time and opportunity cost, right? We can get a salesperson to go knock on 15 doors, which is remarkably harder than most people would assume, right? When you're the founder or the owner and it's your baby, you can't shut up about it, right? I'm like that. I'm sure you're like that. Like my mom is so tired of hearing about what I do and still not really getting it. It's crazy. So
that's funny because my mom has no idea what I do either. She asks me all the time, like, so what are you doing now? Well, same thing I was doing then,
She goes, John, I'm getting a copy of the book, right? Of course, Mom, right? And
digital copy. Hard copies too expensive, Mom.
Free plus shipping. Right. So my daughter comes in and she goes, well, you're not going to read it, are you? Right? And so my mom, being the dutiful mom, is like, well, yes, I'm going to read it. Just like absolutely. And I'm like, don't read this thing. You're going to have a miserable experience, because like you're an insurance underwriter. And while you're definitely selling people, like you're going to think that it's not the same thing. So just enjoy it, put it on the shelf.
Be proud of me.
Be proud of it. Yeah, exactly.
Just do it, Mom. So real quick, before we move any further, I want to pour you.
I want to try the other one. Yeah.
That way you've kind of got them side by side and you can kind of detect what you see as the differences between a rye and a bourbon.
Perfect. I love this. Thank you so much.
You've got both, and you can kind of go back and forth. I'm not going to. I mean, I'm sure you may know, but I'm not going to mention the differences between the two. But there is a difference, and so I'm curious to see. So as we continue conversation, try both of them, see what you think. This is the Rittenhouse, which is when it comes to a rye. If you're a mix guy, if you're a mixology or a cocktail guy, a lot of people would encourage you to go the rye route because there's a lot more spice to it.
Okay.
And so you'll get more peppery, more, all spicy type notes to it. And so a rye goes really well with an old fashioned or whatever Manhattan, whatever kind of mixed drink you're making. As opposed to the bourbon. So I'm curious to know the differences that you're noticing between the two. Anything on the nose that you're getting?
So the rye feels more astringent-y on the like I don't have a super strong sense of smell, but I did wine for a while, like high-end wine at a restaurant here locally, and I was like, guys, I don't really have a strong sense of smell. This is a waste of time. But even with mine, it was still important. So the rye feels more medicinal on the scent, on the bouquet of it. This feels like a lot more depth, more like something I would want to drink. This is something I would make do with, right? Just on that sense alone.
All right, so on the sense alone. Okay, so let's get a taste and see what you think. I'm going to pour myself some too.
Yeah. It actually feels smoother than this.
So not as like punchy of a flavor, not as sharp as a flavor as you would have with that.
This was sharp. That first sip, a
lot of people, now here's a side note. A lot of people associate the word smooth with the proof. Okay. So obviously 125 proof bourbon is probably not going to be as quote unquote smooth as a 90 proof bourbon. Right. And so really what they're honing in on is the alcohol content. But it's interesting that you say that because both of these are the exact same alcohol content. They're both 100 proof.
Interesting.
So one of them tasting more smooth, quote unquote, than the other is not proof based. So that's interesting about your palate, which everybody's palate is different. So you had no shame in saying that, is that it's got to be something else. So maybe your palate prefers the pepper, like the spice, a little bit more of that than the corn, because obviously the rye has a 51% or higher percent of rye in the mash bill. Bourbon has 51% corn or higher. And so that's, corn is sweeter and rye is spicier. So that's cool, man. So just a little bit, I thought this would be fun. You wanted to try a couple differences. So now you can kind of know that, hey, when I'm going down the aisle and I'm looking for a rye or I'm looking for a bourbon, at least on the palate, you thought that was a little bit more pleasing to your palate, a little more subtle. You could really get the flavors. So that's kind of cool, man. Yeah. I'm also a rye fan. So
interesting.
I enjoy it. So, let's talk about your book, man.
Thank you. I would love to.
You wrote a book, and there's just not a lot of people that can just roll out of bed and write a book. You know what I mean? Like that's,
it's.
I actually, believe it or not, wrote a book. How many years ago was that? That's been like 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a long time. And I wasn't trying to write a book. That was the difference.
Okay.
You were probably like, hey, I've got a lot of cool information. I'm going to write a book. And that is no easy feat whatsoever. So tell me about that process for you. What was it like writing? What was the writing process like? How did you kind of structure like, hey, chapters, this is what we're talking about. Here's the process. And it's called Selling from Scratch?
Yes.
Okay. Selling from Scratch. So obviously, if you're a salesperson watching this video, you should go on Amazon right now and check out that book, because it is available on Amazon and also Audible coming soon, right?
Yes, we have it.
The final stuff happening right now.
Absolutely. Wrapping up on that.
So, I mean, I've got you here first, like really, like this is out the this is the book launch party, everyone.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You're welcome for
Thank you.
That. And so what was that process like for you, man? Like, I know that it was grueling, but probably so rewarding to get to the end of that and see what you've done.
It's absurd, honestly, right? Because this all kind of started in the middle of COVID. Like my COVID swing happened very, very early, right? I was coaching a bunch of people who a bunch of marketing agencies who work with drop shippers, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So they're getting their product from China. So people here are just talking about how Corona should change their name, and I'm like losing clients. Like they can't pay their bills, right? Like we were 20 plus per month, right, in coaching clients.
Right.
And so that was in February and March, 3K. Right.
Wow.
So like, what am I going to do? Like, holy crap, and then you got to deal with the doubt of just like, that was just in poker, it's called a cooler, right? Like no one is going to be able to like say for sure when something else like that is going to happen again. And you can either make it through or you fold up, and both are fine, Yeah. So trying to figure my way through that, like, what are we going to do? Is this because of me? Like, man, it gets pretty dark in there sometimes, right? It can be quite lonely. And so a friend of mine and I just start doing a daily show, right? We're just going to go live every day, hold each other accountable, talk about what's on our calendar. He's a marketing guy, I'm a sales guy. And we kind of built a productivity system to really challenge ourselves of like what we could do and like be really accountable to our output. And I just started to do, I'm going to write a chapter today, right? And like a chapter just meant, here are my ideas on this idea of like conversational, consultative, ethical selling, whatever label you want to put it under there, of what does this thing do, right? And I get to work with my partner, who's an amazing person, puts up with way more of my crap than she should, and we've been together for 18 years. And like normally I share all the things that I write with her, right? Like she's my editor, like share everything, you know? But this thing just kind of felt a little bit different. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a course, if it was just like something for me, if it was going to be, So I finished this thing and I'm like, here's the word, baby. Like, what do you think this is? She reads the whole thing and she comes in and she gives me this huge kiss and she was like, this is a book. And I was like, cool. She's like, so it's not ready yet. We got to go do some stuff, but like this is book worthy. And I was like, cool. Like, and because it was COVID and because you're just like, man, there's one foot in front of the other some days of just like, make it through. I didn't really, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like I was writing a book, right? It just felt like I was writing, right? So 1,500 words a day, right? And so then eventually you just have this massive tomb of words. And then because I did it, it's really hard to appreciate that there's like value in it or that it's something special, right? Like, same thing with everything else. You run a business? Yeah, it's really not that big of a deal. You know, like it's always like that. Like, oh, you teach Kung Fu? It's really not that big of a deal. I was just too stubborn to quit, you know, there's always a way to explain it away. And so now whenever people come up like, dude, you wrote a book. It's like, I wrote 1,500 words and then I just put it down and I went and run my day. Yeah. So one of the guys on my podcast, we're both there and I'm telling him about the process and I'm like, just write 1,500 words a day. You'll be fine. And he's like, cool. And I was like, cool. Accountability point. I'm gonna call you on Friday. He's like, yeah, booked. Right. So call him on Friday. How'd it go? How'd what go? The 1,500 words a day. And he goes, I didn't make it to the first day. Right. So like, it's weird when you have those things of just like kind of, it's like shoved right in front of you. Like, not everybody does this kind of thing. And it's weird because the audio book I'm way more proud of, I think, than the actual book because we had to build a little studio. I had to get really on the mic. I really kind of had to do like a bunch of vocal discipline stuff and like stuff that I'm known for of like communicating well, but like it felt so permanent of like, this is going to be a book. So like, I'm so excited for it to come out, but it's been unique because I'm not anybody, right? I'm just this guy who has very strong ideas and has had some success in selling and thinks that more people should do it this way. But like, it's not like I'm like Ryan Holiday or Tim Ferriss or like, you know, any one of these people here on this thing. So like also managing my own expectations of, I will put this in the hands of every person who I think needs to read it. I'm not expecting to hit a bestseller list, you know, and that was my like mantra because man, if I get worked up, I get spooled up, I get really excited. The guy who created the cover was being super cheeky and up in the thing he put in New York Times bestseller. I said, dude, take that off. I don't even want to see it. I don't even want that to be discussed. Yeah. And then someone showed it to like someone and it kind of became the final version. And then we posted it somewhere and someone was like, oh my God. And I was just mad. I was like, all right, John, calm down, you know, because like now that's pressure, right? Of like, I just want to write this thing and I want it to be helpful.
And those are the best books. Those are the best books, man. Like books that people really write from the heart because they want people to know, as opposed to, I'm going to try to make a money stream for myself. I'm going to try to create this revenue stream over here. And so what can I do? Oh, I can write a book. You know, like there's a different dynamic to that all around. And so I'm excited to dive into the book. Thank you. And I'm also excited to learn some Kung Fu from you. So
it's my probably second favorite thing on the planet now.
Okay. Well, we need to get together. I need you to teach me a couple moves that just can keep me safe, you know, and my family and everybody around me. You know, everybody was Kung Fu fighting. And if everybody's Kung Fu fighting, you need to know what the hell you're doing. So
UFC is such a prominent part of our culture. Like I because I did 15 years in Wing Chun Kung Fu, and then as things sometimes happen in martial arts communities, right? Made some choices, left, and still wanted to train. It was like part of my DNA at this point. Like I need that humbling element of this could be better. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so part of my DNA at this point. Yeah. And I started all the way over as like a white belt in jiu-jitsu, right? Which was amazing and humbling and also infuriating and stuff like that, because you go from the person who've like, oh, you have a question? Let's go ask John, to shut up, white belt, you know, kind of deal. And like,
so what belt are you now?
In jiu-jitsu, still very much a white belt, right?
Okay. So how does the belt system work, or is there a belt system in Kung Fu? Like, How
There
does
is.
the hierarchy work in Kung Fu? Same way?
No, it actually works kind of polar opposite, right? And so
Okay.
the idea is that as you gain knowledge, you gain enlightenment. So the colors actually become brighter as you progress through, right?
Okay, interesting.
So you start out with a black sash, right? And the sashes are different than the typical belts of like Japanese, right? So the Japanese belt is meant to keep your kimono closed, right? It has one very specific purpose. The sashes in Kung Fu are meant to kind of work as like a back brace, as well as kind of like keeping your like organs in check, because you're like moving around, you're trying very hard to like hit the crap out of other people. You might want a little bit of padding and protection. So it's a sash and not a belt. And so at least in our school, you went from having nothing, and then you were a black sash, gray sash, blue sash, green sash, red sash, and then gold sash, right? Once you hit red sash, you become part of this thing. It's called the Jiaogar, which means that you are part of the teaching family, right? So you have impact on the curriculum. You're teaching classes on the weekends. You're expected to be part of the community and give back because you have received enough at this point, which is such a cool way to kind of build that really into
cool.
that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, what sash are you currently?
So the inside of the sashes, there are levels, right? And so at the red sash level, there are multiple levels, and then you hit gold. And once you're gold, you're a Sifu, you're a master, right?
Yeah.
So I was at the third level of red. The next test would have been for gold. So
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're right up there, man.
Was pretty deep into that system and
That is
and all
cool,
that stuff.
man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely need to learn a couple things, just mainly a couple chopping moves, really. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Just be able to like kind of chop somebody and put them to sleep if I need to. You know what I mean?
You know, what's really interesting is there's a component of this I talk about a lot, because just like anybody can put up a landing page, right? Anyone can do a lead form. Anybody can write an email. Anybody can do a thing. Like, can you do it the way to get the outcome that you want? Right.
Yeah.
There's such a philosophical side of Kung Fu that like just doesn't get discussed. Right. I mean, all martial arts have it. Like there's a component of it in everything. Right. And when you get around, 10-year black belts of jiu-jitsu, and you talk about 10-year, red sashes and gold sashes of Kung Fu, they've got the same presence of just, I'm not done. There's more, this kind of humbleness, this coachability, this, and it just feels like mastery, and it is so overwhelming, right? Like when you train martial arts or whatever, and you touch hands with like the top, and the absence of, like messing with your buddies and you're all rigid and everything, and you feel that tenseness. The absence of that is terrifying.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like you've never been in a spot to where you feel like that before, but like you're messing with your buddies, it's all tight, it's all rigid, and you guys are like you're gonna hurt somebody because you don't know what you're doing. And then you touch hands with a master, and it's just like there's nothing there, and then there is something there, and it hurts a lot, right? And so I just want that. Like, if you can get hit, if you can get beat up, and it's not how could you do that to me? It's how did you do that?
Right. Yeah. And that's crazy, man. That so much I mean, this could be a whole separate podcast of how that translates into life of like just being the rigidness and all that. Yeah. But regardless of that, dude, I've learned so much today just hanging out with you, man.
Thank you, man.
Thanks so much for stopping by and chatting about the sales guru approach that you have, the process that you developed, the book, adaptedgrowth.com, right?
Yes.
So go check that out. The book, Selling from Scratch, on Amazon. Go search that out as well. John Hill, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for stopping by and chatting, and hope you enjoyed the Heaven Hill offerings tonight.
This has been quite the experience. Yeah. Bourbon is not something I've explored as much as I've done like wine and like craft beer and stuff. And so me and my craft beer buddies would do these things, right? Because they would cellar for multiple years and stuff. And so we'd pull out the 2012 versus the 2014, and we would kind of go for the difference. And it kind of just gives you a different appreciation of it, because I mean, I could drink this whole thing and I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good. And then when I come back and I drink this, whenever that might be, oh yeah, this is good as well. But let's compare, contrast. That's where the depth is. The
Rittenhouse, the Heaven Hill, both bottled and bond, both from Heaven Hill Distillery. Good options. So cheers, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Man.
Absolutely.
And,
this is really great.
And I'm looking forward to your book, man.
Thank you so much.